Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this is the podcast for you. Hey legends, welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. On this week's episode, Ayden and I continue the part 2 of our hog deer hunt, where I'll just come out and say it, I was very lucky to be successful down in Gippsland. If you haven't listened to part 1, please go back and listen to that, as it comes in halfway through a story. So jump into part 1 from last week, listen to that, enjoy the rest of part 2. As usual, at the end of this podcast, we'll be answering one of your frequently asked questions. If you guys have a question you want answered on the podcast, please send us a message at James Doumtsis Outdoors, Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors, or the Twin Elements account on Instagram. Or you can send us an email with the subject line FAQ to info@twinelements.com.au. We'll jump back into the podcast. Very rare nowadays that something comes into our hunting arsenal and completely revolutionises how we do something. But the walk and stalk game bar and lift kit has done just that. This combination has taken our field butchering to the next level. The game bar has 7 features, including a trekking pole, drag bar, shooting sticks, bino attachments, and so much more. The lift kit or pulley system filled a massive hole I always saw in the market. A lightweight system weighing in at only 270 grams that could fit in your pack, but strong enough to lift a 200 kilo animal off the ground, leading to easier butchering and better meat care. It's a piece of equipment that every hunter needs. Check out Walk and Stalk on their website, www.walkandstalkstore.com, and use code TWIN15 to get 15% off your order. And that's where, I think probably our attitude, with us, it's like, even in life, I guess, it's like, was down in the dumps that night, but then it's like quickly like, okay, newfound determination, like tomorrow's a new day, we can't change anything about that. And I think it honestly made us like go harder the next day, where it's like, okay, no, like this isn't going to be like the only opportunity that I get, and like you just become like ravenous on the glass, I guess. And again, was like very fortunate to have the morning start where I was like, okay, shit, there's like I think that was the morning where we just saw like so many deer, and they were just like all around us, in the sense of like, I was like, well, there's a stag, like he's downwind, sadly, so we're not going to like try and stalk him or anything, because I don't want to like bump him, but it's like, okay, at least there's a stag here. And then like straight away from like first light, I'd seen a stag like right on the fence line of that bedding area, and into the thick bush. Like, sun was coming up, same thing, like sun was coming up at like 6:15 in the morning, and it might have been like 6:20 or 6:30, like just as the sun's starting to pop up, and it's just like, okay, there's a hog deer, he's definitely a mature stag, in like a really good spot. And he went down, and I remember like where he bedded, like and looking at like the topography and lining up with like things on like trees on the horizon and stuff like that, where he was, and looking at like, pieces of dock and thistle and like all the rest of it, like exactly where he'd bedded down. And we actually sat off him for a couple of hours, because that morning there was like no wind. Like there was like, I used the Windy app, and like during this hunting, I was on there like constantly being like, okay, what's the wind going to be like? Like you can almost plan your day knowing what the wind's doing, because you're like, okay, like, yeah, it's coming from like this direction in the morning, it's going to be like 4 to 6 knots, and then it drops off in the middle of the day to 2 knots and changes to a westerly, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, we like, like we're probably going to get them standing up here and here then, and blah, blah, blah. Like it was like interesting, just like working and patterning them to the wind. More so, not necessarily direction, but more so, well, a little bit direction, like as in like if it's coming a westerly and there's like a good bank there, they're obviously going to bed on the eastern side, which like increase the likelihood of us seeing them in certain spots. But just more so like how much it was blowing and how many gusts and knots and all the rest of it, as if they're going to be out even at all. And so I actually knew Like we'd seen this stag early, seen him bed early at sort of just say 6:30, 6:45, and I'm like, righto, at 10 a.m. it was an easterly in the morning, like 2 knots, and I'm like, it's going to be blowing a westerly, and it's going to come up to like 7 or 8 knots, which is going to be the highest for the day. And I'm like, okay, perfect. I said to Ayden, we're going to drive around past the back of, like around the back of this bedding area, and we're going to come back in from that corner where we'd seen the stag the night before and had an opportunity at the stag. And so at like 10:30, we walked back to the car, like out, got in the car, drove around, and we walked in, and I got to the corner post, and I'm like, glassing, can't see anything in the grass, and like I'd got a very good bead of like exactly where I thought he was bedded. And we got in there and we sat like what I thought would be like 20 to 30 meters off where he was bedded. And honestly, we sat there for 4 hours, and like in that period, I was like so just wired. Like I was just expecting, like, the wind dropped off in the middle of the day, the sun came out, I'm like, he's gonna stand up here, it's gonna be perfect, it's gonna be beautiful. Like, and I'm looking around for like, you know, literally antler tips, anything, a back, like a noise, anything, right? And like, I'm holding my bow up, like ready to go, to the point now that it's been like 4 days since that encounter, and my left bicep from holding the bow like still bloody hurts. Just standing there with like an arrow on, just like holding the bow, ready to go, like in case something happened, I wanted to like be able to capitalize on the opportunity. And like, after standing there for like 4 hours, like I didn't want to, in case he was bedded in the grass there, because I was like I said, I was very confident on like I'd put him to bed and like where he had bedded, that I didn't want to move forward in case we'd gone past him, which I thought we'd easily do, and then he'd get our wind, and I just to be honest, I could not handle like us going forward 50 meters and then him like, you know, getting up behind us and running off because he'd like winded us. And then I didn't want to go, like I thought about standing up on a fence post, but I'm also like, I'd hate for him to be bedded like 10 meters over the fence, and then here I am like standing up on a fence post trying to get better elevation to see him and like bust him out. And so we just sat there for like 4 hours, nothing happened. It got to like 2 o'clock, and to be honest, it'd been perfect in the middle of the day in the sense that I'm like, he should have got up to even, like, we know that chital deer like every 2 hours will get up. I don't think it's the same with hog deer, honestly. Like I think they will just sit there like all day in one little hole or nest, but like chital deer normally, like with every 2 hours they'll get up, and like they might just get up, like shuffle, like shake their legs almost, shake themselves, put their head down and bed back down. Like they might stand for 20 seconds, but like generally speaking, every 2 hours they'll sort of stand up.
I think the difference there is that like with chital, they're in a lot more open country with like tree canopy, that they're bedding under a specific tree trying to get shade in that North Queensland heat. So for a chital deer, say the sun is coming in at an angle directly above the tree between 12 and 2, by 2 to 3, that sun's starting to come in on a bit of an angle, that deer's lost its shade, it's now in 35-degree heat and warmth and direct sunlight. So it stands up, moves 3 meters away to where the angle of the shade is now hitting, and he can now rebed there and he's comfortable once more. Whereas these little deer, like going by some of the blackberry thickets that they'd just walk into, like they are very happy being in super, super dense vegetation, burrowing in there like a pig, like literally like a boar, just going into a bit of lignum or like a thicket of bush. And again, like they're not chasing basically like comfort from the sun and a bit cooler, shadier area. They're chasing like getting out of the wind. So as long as they're completely covered, hidden in what we've termed like a nest, these hog deer will just sit there and evade the wind for 10 hours of the day is what it seems like, and they will not move. Like they are very, very happy just being in this little safe structure.
Yeah, and I like knowing all this and just like standing there, stood there for 4 hours, and like it ultimately got to the point that I just really needed to cough. And I like had been like fighting it and fighting it and fighting it and fighting it. And like, you know, when you get to the point where you're just like, almost like, for me, you're like, yeah, you're near like choking yourself trying to like not cough, because I just like, same thing, like didn't want to cough, have this hog deer stand up at like 20 or 30 meters and just like run off. But it just got to the point that I'm like, okay, I can't like control this. And so I just like burst out, started coughing, literally did 2 or 3 first to try and like control it, expecting like, okay, this thing's going to stand, I might be able to get a shot still. Nothing. Cough, cough, cough again, nothing. And then like fully just coughed my ass off and nothing. And I was like, okay, that's been like super, once again, just frustrating. We've just like stood here, like super just like wired, just focused in, like for any movement, anything to try and get an opportunity, and like, yeah, nothing, just come up, yeah, essentially a fail again. And it, I was like, righto, pretty quickly, like, it's just said to Ayden, let's just get back to the blind, and we'll like, reset from there. Hopefully something comes out this afternoon. And it was like, we went back to the blind, and I just remember like hopping up in the blind, and honestly, like Ayden wasn't even in the blind yet, and I'd like sat down in the seat and literally like looked out, and like straight away I was like, there's a hog deer there. And then like put the binos up, I'm like, there's a stag like what ended up being like 200 meters from us, like in like an incredibly good spot to stalk. Like I was just like normally it's like you're trying to see like, yeah, the antlers or the top of their head when they stand up, and this is like, no, there's like a full hog deer standing there, like at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm like, holy shit, like that's sick. And then I said to Ayden, like, pass me the camera up so I can try and get some footage of this deer, because he's like, it's not, like I said, it was sort of super rare for us to just like actually see a hog deer standing. And in that like 7 or 8 seconds, he'd like lied down and bedded. And then like, I just remember having this like really, like I was just pissed off with myself, because I could see that he was sort of almost like, just like he'd done a little circle, and I was like, oh, he's probably going to bed there. And like, oh shit, no, like try and get some footage. And then like I said, like by the time I'd like got back up, like, even turned and like set the camera up to try and take some video, he's like gone. I'm sitting there looking with the binos and I can't see him, and I'm like, nah, this is like, I was pretty pissed off, but just because he was in a good spot, but I hadn't really like sort of tuned in exactly to be like, okay, this is exactly where he's like bedded.
I think a slight detail that you're probably withholding there as well is like, part of the frustration was like, you've just seen this stag that has got up from his bed. And what was crazy was like looking at where this deer was that he'd just stood up once you identified where he was, compared to where we'd just been sitting for like 4 hours, was no further than 100 meters. Like it was absurd how close we were, yet it felt like that deer was like in a different country, like a different postal code, whatever distance you want to explain as like being miles and miles away from us. But in reality, it was like within rifle shooting range, but there was just no way that we were ever going to see him from where we were, out of the blind. And then we go around, do this full circle trying to locate a deer, and he's just magically there and appeared again. It was pretty cool to like get that opportunity, but it was also like a reminder of like, they could be deer so close to you that you just don't understand where they are.
Yeah. And we'd even driven past, like where he was bedded, we would have driven past him within like 70 meters in the car to go from like where we'd done the original stalk. We'd driven past him and gone back, and then like parked a couple of 100 meters away, past the hide, and then like walked into where we were sitting in the hide. But I just thinking, I was like, look, I have like a rough bead on where I think he is, because I'd like lined him up with the horizon, and there was like one very distinct tree that just had like a higher branch than like all the rest. And then so like using that to like key myself in, I guess, and also the fact that I'm like, look, you were able to like see this hog deer pretty clearly when he was like standing and feeding. Like there is actually a chance that you might be able to see this one bedded. And I just remember sitting there and for like, probably 5 minutes just like scanning and just like hoping really that I'd like be able to see his antlers. And eventually he like put his head up and like sort of shook his head, and I was like, okay, shit, I can actually see this stag. And it'd gone from me sort of saying to Ayden like, oh look, I might wait for this afternoon and then like see if he stands and like try and move in, to be like, I'm going like right now to go and stalk this hog deer.
Originating in Texas, USA, Numa Outdoors has formulated a durable, breathable, quiet, and comfortable camouflage. Vital for the hunt, their lineup is perfect for concealing you across all terrain, seasons, and pursuits. If you've been paying attention, then you would have seen us across our socials running the Numa lineup. Whether it's at home here in Australia or abroad in the USA hunting for elk, mule deer, and pronghorn, Numa camouflage comes with us. They have a pattern and lineup suitable for every pursuit. If it's early season with hot and humid conditions, then their Renegade lineup is perfect. If you're hunting the rut and temperatures are more frigid and cool, then we recommend trying the Alpha Vertex gear. Start with the merino pullover base layer, which we absolutely love. Then bulk up your kit by adding external layers such as the Alpha Vertex pants, jumper, or vest. For those days where wind chill is a concern and you can't quite get warm, run their puffer jacket, gloves, or beanie and hunt super cozy and comfortable. We are pleased to announce that the Numa range and all their products we have just mentioned are stocked exclusively here in Australia by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. Head into their mega store in Brisbane or smaller store in Hamilton, Victoria to check out the whole range today. Also available via their website www.venturehunting.com.au. Yeah, there was definitely a sense of urgency, and like even by that stage I'd climbed up in the stand and saw where he was sitting, and I was like, I'm gonna stay up here, because for the first time like I could visually from the stand see the deer when he was bedded. So I was like, there's actually no point me going down and accompanying James on this stalk where I'm gonna get a decreased view from on the ground. Like I'm not going to be able to see this stag's antlers until we're within 30 metres. Whereas I was kind of like, at least from 200 metres away up here in the stand, I'm not contributing to any noise. There's less scent moving in, like just the difficulty that's associated on all of our bow hunts with getting two people within bow range. I was like, from this hide, the benefit is that I can actually get a completely unique view of James stalking in on this deer across 200 metres of open grassland. But I can also video the stag and hopefully the shot once he does stand. And that was my theory of like, once he does stand, it's going to have to be within 30 metres to even get an arrow through the grass. And I was like, it's going to be difficult for James to achieve that, let alone two of us there and me over his shoulder. And it would have just added to like, even if James could achieve all that and get the stag to stand, all he has to do is swivel his head and see two big structures there within bow range in a treeless environment. And I just didn't want to like jeopardize this opportunity that just seemed almost too good to be true.
Like, too good to be true is a brilliant way of putting it. And like, so I just took that as the case in the sense that I I got my phone out and I videoed where the stag was bedded. I then took screenshots of like key items of like, okay, that like there's a thistle that's higher than the rest in a very distinct spot, like, you know, and that's at like, you know, like that's at 140 meters. I ranged roughly where he was, and so I'm like, okay, he's 200 meters roughly from the hide, like plus or minus, like because he's in long grass, there's nothing really to range, but like I'm like, he's roughly 200 meters plus or minus from the hide, and the thistle's like 140. There was a piece of dock at 100. He's in this line. There was like a little blackberry bush that had like a bend in it from like almost like a half circle from the left to the right. Took photos of all them. I'm like, that's at 200 meters too, but that's not in line with him. It's like in line with this thistle, blah, blah, blah. Like had all these instructions set out in my head. And so the interesting thing was, it was like 3:30 in the afternoon, and at like 3 o'clock, the wind was blowing from the west at like 2 knots, and at 4 o'clock, the wind was blowing from the southeast, but at 3 knots. But like and this is what like sort of background information comes into it and is like really important and stuff, where like our friend had said like there'd been a couple of times where like it'd been westerly, like gentle westerlies all day, and he's like, yeah, that's fine. And like even the windy app would say, oh yeah, it's going to be like 2 knots at 6 o'clock when it gets dark. But our mate would be like, no, it generally comes from the east in the afternoon. Like it will just like, even if it doesn't say it, it'll blow from the east. And like we'd sat there, and then yeah, like at 5 or 6 o'clock, that last like hour of light, it'd come, like, you know, lo and behold, it'd come from the east, and it'd be like, you know, not a full-on breeze, but it'd be like the prevailing wind direction, I guess. And so as I'm like got down from the hide and I'm like walking in, I like all of a sudden the wind just feels like it's like blowing straight to this thing. And I like stood there and stopped for a second, and I'm like, nah, I've just got to like back it in that it's going to come from like an easterly direction. And so rather than from the west, because it was just like switching back and forth. And I'm like, I'm just going to like come around sort of more to my left and actually like, yeah, come in from the east and like get that right. And so I'm like looking at Ayden and like ranging the hide, which was obviously an elevated position, looking at where I think he is because I can like see the blackberry bush. And I'm like, cool, get to the dock, and I'm like, cool, I'm at 100. And then like get to the thistle, and I'm like, cool, I should be like roughly 60 off him. And I'm sitting there glassing, and like slowly moving forward, like knowing that like it should be from the hide to the dock should be in a line, from the hide to the thistle should be in a line. And it should be roughly at that blackberry bush at a distance. And I'm like looking, still like slowly sort of moving in and cutting around to the left. And it wasn't until I was like maybe 50 meters off him when I actually saw him like put his head up again and be like, okay, that's where his antlers are. And then he started like shaking his head and stuff, and I was like, okay, cool. Like I couldn't see, when I say like I can see his antlers, I mean like, yeah, he's a 12-inch deer, but it's like I could see like 4 or 5 inches of his like antlers. Like I could just see like the tops. And so at 50 meters, I like really like got up on my tippy toes once I could see him, and I'm like spend a bit of time being like, okay, how do I actually think he's lying? Like which direction's his antlers facing? Because I hadn't seen him bed, so I don't know if he's like facing towards me, away from me, like where is he bedding, because that's going to impact like how I'm going to stalk this thing. And I worked out that he was bedded like facing sort of diagonally away from, like his head position was diagonally away from me, and I thought he was like sort of curled around where his body would have been, like his body would have been on a quartering away angle to me, and his head was like sort of around to the right of that. And so I started like moving around to the left, and he put his head down. I'm like, okay, this is perfect. Had a little bit of a game trail, and like at this stage I'd taken my boots off like back at the hide, and so I'm like super, like the grass is shorter here, which was so nice, and I'm like just being super conscious to like, you know, lift my feet above the grass, like get there slowly. Like I'm not moving slow, but I'm moving very deliberate and very quietly. Like lift your feet up above the grass, put it down gently in like a like, and I had like a decent bit of wind, but not really much. Like I said, it was only a couple of knots. And like quite quickly I've moved from like 50 meters into like 30 meters. And the hard thing is, because he's in the grass, like I know rough, like, yeah, with where he's bedded within like a meter or two at all times, even if he hasn't got his antlers up. But there's nothing really to range. Like the only thing really to range was sort of this small blackberry bush that might only be the size of like, oh, I don't know, like above the grass, all I could see was like the size of like a washing basket, I guess. And so I'm like ranging, and it's saying like, and then I'm ranging in front of me to be like, okay, if I can get to that spot, that's going to be like 25, that's going to be like 20. And so I just keep slowly moving in. And in my mind, I'm like, even though he's going to get, like the grass is going to be short enough here that even if he stands up and he's like quartering away, like I'm going to be super in the open where like the grass probably comes up to my like mid, like the body of the grass, like the bulk of the grass is only like, just say a foot high, right? But then the grass heads come up to like above my knee, like probably 2 feet high. So that's where like looking through the grass, I can like very easily see his body and stuff. And that's why I'd seen him so easily. But still, that just meant for me that I like, if I was fully standing, I was going to be like super visible in this environment. So I'd made the decision that I was going to get around behind him and then like kneel down. And as I was like moving in, so I'd got to 25 meters, I was like, okay, I just need to get like a couple more steps and I'll be at 20. And then I was going to like kneel down in a position where I could like almost lie down flat and sort of roll myself up as he stood up. And then I was like confident that I could like draw back and then like get above the grass and then get a shot. Well, that plan didn't entirely happen, because when I was like halfway through from my 25 to 20 meter progression, like he put his head up again, and like I'm assuming they were just lying at like having their head like on the ground, and he put his head up and he just like started shaking his antlers, and I'm like, okay, this thing like is awake, very much so, and I can like see his head now, and I can see his like not fully his face, like as in the bottom of his jaws, but I can see his ears, I can see like up to the level of his eyes. So I'm like, this thing, like, even though he's facing away from me, I'm like, if this thing turns to like his head around, he'll be able to see me. And I'm like, the wind had sort of stopped, and I was like thinking, do I kneel down? And I'm like, no, just like stay here. And like, if he looks like he's gonna like, if he's like, looks like he's gonna look your way, like abruptly, just like don't move obviously. But if he's like looking around and stuff, you can sort of like half squat in the grass to like lower your profile a bit while he's bedded.
That erratic sort of antler movement was definitely noticeable for me. Like I'd watch James over probably 30 minutes, 45 minutes, methodically like sneak in like he would any sort of bow hunt or stalk that he's approaching a deer, and he did super well to get into range, re-identify the deer as he's just explained. And like for me, looking from my elevated position in the viewfinder, like I sort of lost that sense of, oh, is he at 100 from the deer, or is he at 30 from the deer, or 50? Until like eventually I saw him get right in close and share the exact same line as the deer. I'm like, okay, he's very close. I could see that James had like acknowledged like, yep, he's glassing exactly where the deer is. Like he's probably seen his antler tips and now has like the same line that I do. And then I noticed him strategically go out further to the west, knowing that that gave him a better wind direction from the east. And it wasn't until he sort of did that I like looked through the frame of the video camera, and I'm kind of like, nah, he's close. He's got to be within 25, 30 meters. Like he's got the bow on his hip. He's sort of done everything he's just explained there, like set his feet, got ready. Like he's very much ready to shoot him. And like noticeably for me, like I'm trying to save camera battery, filming on the SD cards and not fill it, like all this other stuff to make sure I capture the moment. But as soon as that stag started like shaking his head, it's just something that you see commonly, and when you hunt bedded deer a lot, it's like a green light. Like this stag is frustrated, there's flies bothering him, he's in the sun, he's not comfortable, like he's woken up from that deep sort of, you know, what humans refer as like REM sleep. Like something's going to happen here. And like it was so erratic, and obviously we both noticed it, and I just knew it was only a matter of time before something happened here.
And so I'm like 25 meters off this deer. Like Ayden said, my bow's up, like I'm looking through my bow, and this deer is like shaking his head, and like I pretty quickly worked out that I thought he was on like a slight, like not a slight, like a pretty considerate quartering away angle. But I pretty quickly worked out, because he went around to his right hand side and he's like licking back on himself. I'm like, yeah, perfect, yeah, cool. He's like bedded, because I thought he was sort of rolled with his like left hand shoulder like more towards the ground, if that makes sense, and with his like legs almost like his right leg sort of out in front of him, and yeah, like, and facing sort of away from me a little bit. Like I'm like, oh, when he stands, it's going to be perfect. Like his body's going to be like, his head's going to be behind his body, and it's going to be like the perfect quartering eye angle, all this stuff. And then he just switched around to his left one time and started licking his left hand side, and that's when I'm like, holy shit, I'm like proper, like pretty much ass onto this deer, which like was fine, but it was just like not the angle that I'd like expected when I first like looked at him. And so for like this period of time where, like I said, it was probably 5 to 7 minutes, I'm sitting there at 25, and like he'd like lick himself and like shake his head and be all, you know, pissed off and frustrated. And then I'm like, okay, he's going to get up. And I'm like, literally like release Ayden on, like lift the bow off my hip. Like, okay, this is about to happen. He's going to stand up. And then he'd stop and like calm down for 20 or 30 seconds. I'm like, oh shit. So I put my bow back down slowly. And then he'd like do it all again. And it just like kept going on. And then there was just one patch where he just like, actually, I should go back and mention. So I'm normally very composed and good with buck fever and like my heart rate and like shaking and stuff. And to be honest, like normally when things happen, like, I don't know, like a few of you guys are probably aware that shot like a very good red deer recently, and like obviously shot a few critters in my life. And I can honestly say that normally, like, it's, even if it's something like really big or something I've always wanted to shoot or whatever, it's normally like after the shot that I get that like buck fever or like whatever. And like in this case though, the whole time where I'm standing there in that like 5 to 7 minutes, like honestly, I'm surprised that he couldn't hear my heartbeat with just how I was like beating out of my chest. My legs, so my front, I've got my left leg because I'm a right-handed shooter, so my left leg is in front of my body, and my left hamstring, because I'm in like a half squat, is like cramping, so I'm trying to like straighten that out. Equally though, my back right leg, when I like, every time I would like fully straighten that out, it would start shaking with like the adrenaline and the excitement. Like my leg was like physically like pulsing, like I was having a little epileptic fit. And so I'm just like going through the motions where I'm like shifting slowly my weight from like back and forth, because like if I put the weight onto my back leg, it would stop the shaking, but then equally my like front leg would like start cramping. And then so I'd shift the weight back onto my front leg to try and like stretch it out, and then my back leg would start like having these like uncontrollable shaking fits again. And I was just like, holy shit, how am I gonna be able to shoot this deer? Like my heart is like pumping. I'm trying to like close my eyes and like breathe and do all the stuff that we've talked about in this podcast about like buck fever, and you know, telling myself like, oh nah mate, you're not gonna get it. And like honestly, none of it worked. Like it just like, for me in the moment, I was just like super, like we'd worked, so it's day 8 now. Ayden and I, like even though it was my like 3rd hunting day, like Ayden and I just put in so much time and so much effort into this hunt, and it was just like you know, I did get it under control, but it was just like, it was normally I can like really, I don't know, talk myself out of it and just be like, get back to like almost a base zero. Whereas I like, you know, especially in that like first minute of like, okay, shit, like when he starts shaking his head, I'm like, this is gonna actually happen. Like, you know, I'm in like with a really, really, really good chance here. In that first minute to 2 minutes, it was like I was at 100, and it took me a couple of minutes to talk myself down and get myself and like breathe through it, just to even get myself where like my back legs stopped shaking and stuff, and probably get myself down to like a 50% like under control buck fever situation, because I was not like poised at all. Like it was, yeah, like the heart rate was going and I was like an emotional wreck. And that leads me to like the final moment where I could see that he was like visibly just like, I'm like, yeah, he's gonna get up here, and he's like shaking his head, he's licking himself. I'm like, this thing is like fully awake. He was like moving his head around and actually like nibbling the grass in like a half circle around where he was bedded. And I'm like, yeah, he's gonna get up here and like have a feed. And it wasn't long after that when he actually stood up. And what I did was, so as soon as he stood up, I drew back, which in hindsight was probably like, I probably didn't need to, but I'm glad that I did. In the sense that, so when he stood up, he was on like a very tight quartering away angle to me. And he's standing there and he like starts licking his right hand side, and I'm like, cool. And he does that for a second, then he stands there and he starts licking his, like he puts his head down for a feed, and then starts like licking his like left hand side. And I'm like, okay, he's just gonna like stand there, and it's probably been like 20-25 seconds, and that whole time I've just got my like option, like he ended up being like 23 meters, which I'd worked out before this moment. So I had my 20 pin like on him, perfectly like just stable, right on his back right hip, and I'm sitting there just like holding it. And to be honest, like a lot of this comes from like just the confidence in setup and gear that we run and shoot. Like I mentioned earlier, like I'm shooting like a 30-inch RX9 Ultra that's like 82 pound. So just absolutely thumping out arrows. Like I use like a super confident setup that like the week before had literally shot, you know, a massive red stag with quartering on, and got like a complete pass through on that red stag, like breaking through the front of its like chest cavity all the way out the back, and like, you know, found the arrow 15 meters out the back of him, in some vegetation and stuff. And so I'm like, with this hog deer, I've got, you know, a massive pilot cut up the front, backed up by like a day 6 shaft, which has like very good components, like top level components, in terms of its like outsert setup and stuff. And I'm like, this arrow is going to like get into where it needs to go. And so I'm holding it like tight. It's like I said, it's a super tight angle, and I'm holding it there, and I'm like, I'm probably about 1.5 inches left. If I hit exactly where I want, 1.5 inches left would be the femur. But I also know in my mind that if I was to hit that femur, my arrow would literally break that femur and just keep on going. And I know that because I use that exact same setup in the US, and I shot an antelope with it at 15 meters quartering on, and I broke its front shoulder, continued diagonally through the whole animal's body, broke its femur, and continued out the back, and was just holding in by the fletchers in its back leg. And so I'm like, if I can do that to an antelope, which is like the size of a fallow deer, I can definitely do it to a hog deer. And so like, that's where like having really, having the best gear essentially we can find, and being super confident, using it all the time, hunting all the time, like I knew that this arrow was going to go into where it needed to. And so I'm sitting there super confident, and I let the arrow fly and pretty much watched the arrow hit perfectly where I was aiming. And like, I watched this hog deer run, and like, this is the thing with hog deer, and I think it was just like probably more the fact that they just like disappear in the grass. And I watched this deer run and travel like in a sort of an arc out to the right, like 60 meters, and then just disappear in the grass. And like, I don't know, I think it was just a matter of like the fact that these things have just like disappeared on us at every turn. And I was like super confident in the shot, but I also just like, I text Ayden, his phone had actually run out of battery. And he came down to me just from like the hand signaling and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I just think it's like same thing. Like, he's like, I watched it run 60 meters and like bed up in the grass, or like, crash down in the grass. So at that point we were just like both ecstatic, but still like obviously having not seen the animal like fall over, because the grass is so high over these animals, we began blood trailing him.
And that's where, like, I guess my perspective was sort of important too, to a degree. Like, I hadn't got a great analysis of like how far he'd run, because everything looks so different from a different viewpoint. But I reckon I had seen him run for like a matter of 5 seconds, if that. And same thing, I could only go off really his like white tail in the long grass, and he was running like head down, like nose to the ground, ass up, tail up. And then I just saw him do like a half little arc. And by that 5th second, I just saw him like what I would only describe as like nosedive into a tall bit of vegetation. And there were these 2 tall bits of dock, like seed pods, I guess. That is where I last saw him. And like, I gave it a few minutes, didn't realize that James had obviously tried to text me to say like what was going on, could I see anything? And I just thought, all right, I've given it a bit. I'm going to slowly get down there and, go video this process of trying to blood trail him. And like, I got down there, and James, you could tell, was obviously like a little bit anxious, in the sense of like everything had felt good as he just explained, but like until he laid hands on that animal, like there's a certain anxiety that comes with blood trailing him. But like, I walked over to where James was now standing, marking the shot on his phone on Onyx, saying like hit, and I was like, oh, that's good blood. And straight away, like, I could see an entry and exit, like blood spray on both sides, where it looked to me like it was an entry and exit, but in reality, I think it was actually like an entry getting smashed that hard by the arrow that it nearly probably pushed this deer like 90 degrees around, and it was probably like a spray of blood from that same exit on the other side of where he'd like been standing. But James just said like, look, I'm going to take this slow, I'm going to blood trail him now, you just hold back. And yeah, James went about that process.
When it comes to bows, reliability matters. That's why serious archers choose Hoyt. Built for performance and consistency, Hoyt bows deliver the speed, accuracy, and feel you need to make every shot count. Whether you're on the range or out in the field, Hoyt gives you the edge. Upgrade your bow and experience the power and precision of Hoyts. Remember, get serious, get Hoyt.
Yeah, I think it was just the fact of like, I don't know, we normally see, we're pretty confident, it's sort of the same with the red deer, like, we see the animals that we shoot often just fall over. And it was just the fact that these hog deer, like we said, disappear in the grass, that we hadn't been able to see him, and he's sort of gone further than what I expected, even in the couple of seconds that he'd only run for. And it's just that we'd lost him, like because I was down on my at ground level, whereas Ayden was elevated. Like when I'd seen him stumble a few times, at a flat out sprint, he literally tripped and face dived and then got up and face dived. But when I'd last seen him, he was still running. And so that was same thing with the red, just that little in the back of my mind had me a little bit nervous. I was super confident in the shot, or I wouldn't have taken it. And anyway, I just said, look, I'm going to blood trail this thing. I'm not going to just walk over to where I think he should be. And so, the blood trail was easy. There was really good blood. And so it went blood trailing. And I'd gone that 50 meters to where I thought I'd last seen him. And Ayden, having the video was brilliant, because being able to look back and see the video of you lose him in the long grass as well, but you don't see him exit it. And that's where I was pretty confident he was there. But just same thing, almost a last little hurrah for for hog deer hunting. I got to where and the blood was really good, and then it just stopped. And I'm standing there, and it was right on the entry of this high grass, and I'm looking and man, this deer should be here. I should be able to see this deer. And same thing, after the shot, I'd actually done a little video in my phone being you're standing here, using things in the horizon, this is where you'd last seen him, and blah blah blah. And I was pretty much standing where I'd last seen him. I should be able to see this hog deer. And then I just remember looking up from my phone and took one step, and here 5 meters away in front of me in the long grass, I just see this antler tip, and I just remember screaming and looking back at Ayden and just being so ecstatic, just absolutely just the joy. And I think it's just anything in life, not even hunting, anything in life that you just put your time, put the time and dedicate yourself to really pursuing, and then failure after failure, and you pick yourself back up, and then obviously having Ayden have a couple of stalks and me have a couple of stalks, and then to actually be able to get something on the ground that we just in a couple of moments just thought, no, this wasn't it's not even going to be achievable. And you hear how rare it is that people shoot hog deer with a bow, to actually get one, and obviously get it on film as well, was just something special. And it was almost same thing, I'm bloody getting emotional now, but it was even when we were there, it was didn't have a cry or anything, but it's there's tears in your eyes of just how special this hunt was. Again, just how it's just a reflection of the effort that you put into trying to pursue something, and to actually succeed in that was it was a hunt that I certainly won't forget for many ways, or many reasons I should say. But to actually get a hog deer on the deck was incredible, and I'm just very, very thankful to obviously the people that had us, and enabled us to come down here and hunt this private property, but also just even Ayden, for the amount of time that we put in to try and get one. It was just that highest of highs that you get in hunting or anything really. And I was over the moon. I was stoked to actually put my hands on him, and he was a beautiful mature animal. Not that measurements or anything, but he's went 12 inches and by 11 inches, and it was, interestingly enough, I think one of the coolest things about it was actually the stag that Ayden had stalked on the 5th day, that I'd had the shot at on the 7th day, and then on the 8th day was actually able to take him, which was cool to actually, firstly get a really mature hog deer, but secondly also get a deer that we'd obviously had a few encounters with, just added to that sort of story of the hunt and just, how special it all really was.
What was really cool, like finally laying hands on these animals as well, and like James's own stag was going through that check-in process as well. And again, just the next morning we went and measured this hog deer up. We went and took all of his personal measurements and statistics and things. And what was really cool and sort of made us realize like, oh, he is actually like a mature stag, is like in this region up until I think day 8, so the 8th of April, there'd been 40 odd, maybe 50 hog deer harvested, male of the species. So there was a pretty good data pool to go off, and whilst James's hoggy didn't have like the biggest antlers, it was the second largest by a number of measurements and first in another. So he was quite a long deer. He had extreme girth on him. He had good shoulder length, and then obviously overall weight. Like when you think that something's either tall and long and heavy, like girthy, it's going to grossly weigh quite a bit. So do you remember the exact measurements on a few of those?
I don't. So I think he was 52 kilos, so like guts out. And to be honest, just with like meat care and meat quality and stuff with the shot. So the shot, going back to that, the shot had come in like just in front of the back leg, and then pretty much popped out, and like not popped out, but like had protruded and almost caused, like it hadn't actually broken through the skin, but it almost caused him to have like a baseball size Adam's apple in his throat. And so essentially I just like absolutely skewered this hog deer, where I just, completely everything inside of him, like all of his like guts were obviously opened up, but then his chest cavity and everything like that, like I hadn't actually hit his heart, but I'd say I'd taken out like the top of his heart, and like all of his chest cavity was full of the, typical coagulated blood and all that type of stuff. So he'd pretty much gone 50 or probably 60 meters in that little 5-second death run, and then just expired, which is super grateful to just be able to do that. But he so with all the guts out, and then also taking some of that like internal like flap meat and stuff like that, like anything that looked like it'd been contaminated or anything like that, we removed all of that. So he went 52 kilos gutted, and then I can't remember his he ended up being the second longest, second heaviest. I think the heaviest one that had been weighed in was about 54. I want to say 100. No, it wouldn't be that long. I don't know. I can't remember, but it was the second longest. Oh, here. Read it, my brother.
We're just pulling out the actual official measurements. So one cool thing is that you obviously, when you check in the deer, go through your tags, license, all these sort of things that make it a legal harvest. Being a male of the species, you put a tag at the time of shooting the animal around the bone on the back, sort of like Achilles, I guess, of the animal's, back leg. So you go through when the animal was shot, where roughly, private, public, all these sort of details. So as far as the girth, he was 90 centimeters. Body length was 1.36 meters. Shoulder height, 73 centimeters. Body weight, 52.3 centimeters. It then gives you things like, was it field dressed, yes or no? So like that obviously takes into account if they, which again is like super interesting, because someone might shoot a hog deer at 10 in the morning, call the Hog Deer GMA check-in station, say, have you got an availability at 10:30? I'll bring the deer in now, like I'm not far off. Yep, come in, mate, we'll check him out then. They might not even field dress that animal. They might do that, like go in, check it in, weigh the animal at 75 kilos. So again, by having hundreds, if not thousands of male deer that have been gutted and males that haven't been gutted, they then get total weight versus, field dress weights, and they can average. The average gut fill of a hog deer might be 20 kilos, 15 kilos, whatever number that might be with statistical evidence. So very, very cool. And then again, like they grabbed the bone out of the jaw, assess teeth for age and that type of stuff, which is really cool and really insightful. They obviously then have data for DNA as well. they take a photograph of the antlers against a white background with the date, hunter's name, tag, and all that type of stuff, so that if in 10 years they want to do a random check to make sure that James legally harvested that hog deer and doesn't have, you know, another random hog deer on his wall, and he's only ever checked in one hog deer, that they know that that's that animal that was shot in April on the 8th in 2026. So it's a very, very good system. They measure antler spread, antler length of each antler, as well as whether it's in velvet, hard antler, and the thickness of like the coronets and things like that. So as you can hear, there's quite a few measurements there. We might not be covering all of it, but just to be able to like check in James's stag and go through that process was so rewarding. But what was even better was the fact that we had now like a day and a half for me to basically try and fill those tags. And as exciting as that was, it very quickly turned a little bit, like frustrating and disappointing, in the sense that the weather just didn't play the ball for us. I don't know if we actually saw a stag on our particular property following that moment. Like, it was super like active day or 2 or 3 of hunting, and then it just went from blowing, you know, probably up to 10 knots as sort of the greatest at certain points in the day, as like the minimum knots that the wind was blowing was 10 knots, going to like 20-25 knots at times. And it basically just resulted in these hog deer like going to ground, and I'm assuming becoming either nocturnal or not really feeding in areas that were visible, maybe like in a real secluded patch of cane grass somewhere that out of the wind they were able to feed. But we basically went from seeing multiple stags a day, James having that stalk and missing, having that stalk and shooting the deer, to like basically not being able to hunt a stag. And that wasn't how I sort of wanted the trip to obviously end, but it was just like an accurate representation of what hog deer hunting is. And for me, like for both of us to be able to walk out of there with like a stalk on a mature deer, James obviously be able to take that same deer, was like super rewarding for our first dose of hog deer hunting.
Yeah, those last 2 days, in terms of like, if you can pick, I thought it was going to be, so looking at the weather, that second last day, when we actually checked in my hog deer, so day 9, I thought it was going to be a super good day, because it was like 27 degrees, which they obviously like the sun, but I hadn't checked the weather forecast for the wind until that day, because it just sort of changes. And like the night before, it's essentially blown up and gone from being like a day where it was going to be like 27 degrees with winds of like, you know, 5 to 6 knots, you know, so gusts probably up to 10 to 12 knots, to being like 15 to 20 knots with gusts, I'm assuming up to probably 30, 35 knots, to the point that like we got back there that afternoon after like checking in my deer, and like you almost couldn't glass because the blind itself like was shaking. Like we drilled holes into the frame of the blind so that we could like have more room and use, like, rather than having a tripod, just have like the center of the tripod like inserted into the hide and just film off that. And I mean, like, it wasn't ideal, but like we ended up taking them down because it was so windy. We were worried that they were going to like somehow like shake out of the hide and like fall down the, you know, 3 meters or whatever that the hide was. Like, it was like crazy windy. And like we sort of knew like that these deer were just going to go like underground, really. And like I'm not going to lie, like we did see, not that day, but the next day, like so day 10, which was actually yesterday, we did see some hog deer, but it was like in situations like where I spoke about, where it's like they were like on the neighbor's place and like only 100 meters away, but in this like little creek that we could sort of see into, and they were like in the creek, like completely tucked out of the wind, where the wind would have just been going straight over the top of them, and they're sitting in there, you know, where they did get up sporadically. Like if the wind dropped off a little bit, they would get up. When I say a little bit, it drops from like 20 knots down to maybe 12, so still very windy, but they'd get up and have like a little bit of a feed, and then, you know, and then bed back down. And so it was just that rather than them bedding out in the open pastures and stuff where we could have a stalk, they were bedding up in like the super thick cover where there was still plenty of feed around, still plenty of water, and not really having to come out into the open where we could actually stalk them. So it was a pretty, like, I don't know, like me personally, like I was pumped because like I'd obviously got my stag, but I was also super excited that, like, you know, Ayden, who was there with me every step of the way, like he was going to get a second chance and hopefully he could get a hog deer too, just knowing like how hard we'd both worked for it. And yeah, when the weather just was shit, it was like, I don't know, that's hunting, but it was just, yeah, a bit of a slap to the face, I'm not going to lie.
Oh, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, with 10 days of hunting, ideally 5 days each, like I actually had 6.5, 7 days of hunting in the grand scheme of things, but it's like, it didn't matter how long you put out there. It was like, in those 10 days, you're chasing the one day where the wind drops down to near nothing and the deer are out feeding on your block. And like, in reality, it sort of seemed like a lot of that fell on James's, and that's where, like, I'm super grateful that he was able to capitalize. But just being our mannerisms and our approach, like those last 2 days, we kind of knew, like, we're probably better off driving back up north to go home because we're not going to see deer. But like, we didn't leave that to chance. We sat in that blind from daylight till dark. Even during the middle of the day, thought, oh, we'll change tactics up when it's like blowing 25 to 30 knots and we'll just go and walk areas that we haven't really been seeing deer, and we'll try and just like see if we can come across a set of antlers at 20 meters and create something from nothing. But it didn't happen for me in the end, unfortunately. But again, like in 10 days of hunting hog deer, for one of us to be able to achieve that goal of shooting it, when some people spend a lifetime hunting them with the bow and not shooting a stag, like, it's a super rewarding, you know, takeaway from this trip that we have been able to go through this process and get some footage and get it on film. And like, that's probably one of the things is, like, I don't really know how many people have bow hunted hog deer and succeeded, let alone bow hunted and shot a mature stag and succeeded, let alone bow hunted and shot a mature stag on video and succeeded. So it's just one of those things, like when James succeeds, I succeed, vice versa. Like, we're not selfish in that sense. And to be able to, like, yeah, drive home with that level of satisfaction after our first stint of hog deer hunting is absolutely amazing. And like, again, massive shout out if our friend is listening who's helped set this all up. Like, his hospitality and friendship is like incredible. For him to be able to open his doors and allow us to undergo this opportunity is something that we won't soon forget. And like, I just hope that honestly, now I've got that taste of hog deer hunting, as frustrating and excruciating as it is, and it's just like a patience game. I really do love it. I am keen to one day get back down here to Gippsland in Victoria and try my hand at hog deer hunting again. And yeah, just, it's bow hunting, no matter what species, what animal, it has its challenges, it has its perks. And like, we probably didn't speak enough to, like, there were some mornings, especially early in like the piece, like April 1st, probably through to 3rd when I was hunting, some of the glamour sort of mornings that we're having with just like mist and fog, which was an added element. So like, you got these days where it's beautiful and calm and still. What would happen is, like, you'd get this fog bank roll in for the best 2 hours of the morning when you should be seeing deer go to bed, and you just lose all visibility. And then the wind would blow in and wipe that fog away, but it would leave you with deer that are bedded now in a spot that you can't see them. So like, it was just a massive learning curve. Walked away with a massive appreciation for these deer, and the fact that James is able to head home with like a cooler full of meat, a cape at the taxidermist, and like, you know, take a lifelong memory now from this trip is something that we're both super grateful for.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And doing a so pretty keen doing a half body mount, which just because I like the likelihood that I will probably ever hunt a hog deer again logistically is like very low, as you guys are probably aware. Like, love my red deer hunting, so like sort of March, April is very much dedicated to that. And this was, yeah, like a massive opportunity for us to go down and hunt, you know, some of the best private that you'll ever get onto. And like Ayden said, like, you know, to the person or the family, I guess, that hosted us, like, yeah, thank you so much for opening your doors to us and, you know, treating us like family and bloody putting us up and putting up with our bitching and moaning and trying to figure out these little hog deer that bloody, yeah, I don't know, like, there was, as an experience, it was like breathtaking really. And the hospitality and kindness that we were shown soon won't be forgotten. So thank you to them. But yeah, in terms of hog deer hunting, it's some ways it's a blessing that it's every, only April, because I don't know if I could like stand the frustration of like sitting in a hide for days and days on end all year round trying to see these things and actually get in on them and hunt them, because it just like, I don't know if my eyes are going to recover very quickly after sitting through the glass looking for hours and hours and hours trying to see one in the grass, and just the emotional load, I guess, of like, I think maybe it'd probably be better the fact that if we didn't have the time constraint of 10 days and you could hunt them in Jan or Feb or like November or whatever, when you're not hunting like other species. It may make it a bit different, have a little bit of a different feel, but yeah, it's I think I'm going to need at least 12 months to recover before we try and go and tackle another one down there for Ayden.
It's interesting. It's certainly like you've heard the meat eater crew talk about like that type 2 fun where like at the time it's frustrating, you're sort of bored at times, you're sort of thinking, oh, this is uneventful, nothing's going to work, like you're sitting in rain, like some days it was 30 degrees, some days it's raining, windy and cold, like, and it's not until you actually leave that experience, and even now like driving back talking about it, I'm sort of becoming like more affectionate for the last 10 days, whereas when we were there living it every day, hunting, waking up at 4:30, getting back to the house or the cabin at like 8 p.m, cooking dinner, going through the hunt, uploading footage, all this other stuff, strategizing for the next day. You're going to bed at 10 o'clock, getting 6.5 hours of sleep, doing that every day. It becomes like draining, but you leave and it becomes actually like you're more reminiscent of it after you've left that reality. Whereas there's that type 1 fun that people talk about where it's like going to a theme park, and like you go to the theme park and on the day it's like the best thing ever, but then you leave and you kind of go, oh yeah, no, like I've actually experienced that, and I kind of remember it more for the big drive out there in traffic and like the over ridiculous prices to go and enjoy that fun at the theme park, and the way that the kids behave wasn't ideal, and the frustration of having to sit in line all day and wait for a 2-second ride wasn't actually that fun, and the food there, the food court was kind of shit, and you leave that experience that you thought at the time was like amazing, and you go home and you're like, oh, actually I probably can like afford not to do that again, like I've experienced it. Whereas for me, now that we're driving away, I'm kind of like, geez, I really hope that maybe next April I can dedicate a bit of time to get back down to Victoria and hunt those cool little deer. But one little thing that I will also just introduce the idea of is Dad, we did mention, was on this trip earlier, but we didn't really go into his version of events over probably 4 or 5 days of hunting in the first few days of April. So whilst we had access to the private property, and that was just to try and maximize filming a bow hunt on on private land for these hog deer, Dad was hunting without a camera crew obviously on public land and trying his hand there. So he's actually coming up north. That's who we're driving north to come and meet, and he's going to try his hand at red deer hunting. So I dare say the next podcast that you guys will hear after this hog deer saga is going to be Dad with a bit of story time, which I know you guys, our audience, absolutely love. Everyone really supports Dad in his hunting adventures, and it's always a good time for us catching up with him and going through stories with the man that made it all possible for us. So we'll talk to him, get his version of events from hog deer hunting in early April, and then hopefully Dad's going to be targeting his first ever red deer stag. So that's just something in terms of things to come.
Yeah, see, I'm in a similar boat. Like, you look back on the hunt now and there's little things like just appreciating watching them. Like, even at the time it was frustrating, like looking over the boundary fence and seeing these deer ultra close at like 100 meters just feeding and stuff. But it's cool just seeing their mannerisms. Like, they are super cute deer. Like, they're so, like, you almost just want to like go and pick them up and cuddle them. And I guess for me, that's sort of why I'm doing the half body mount, because I do really want to show like their size and like some more of the features and stuff of these deer, because they are very unique. But I would also add that, what is type 1 fun? Listening to red deer roar and fallow bucks croak, and that also happens in April. So that's sort of the complicating factor. But like I said, for me, that's also why I'm probably getting the half body mount, because I don't know when I'll next be able to chase them time and logistics wise. Like Ayden and I, it's a 14.5-hour drive down to where they are, and then obviously like a lot of time and effort from the people that have hosted us, and opened their doors to us to be able to hunt this species, where otherwise we definitely couldn't invest the time required to probably get them on public land, where there's definitely opportunities and access at really nice deer. But as you've heard, especially with the bow and trying to film and stuff, we need all the help we can get and all the opportunities we can get. Hunting on public land, they are harder and they are fewer and far between. We probably don't have the time to go down there and invest to learning where they go and learning their habits, and also invest like a couple of weeks to trying to be successful and most likely year after year. Very fortunate to get some private access on this hunt.
Huntingful is the foremost hunting resource with varied levels of membership to get you on your next adventure. If you've seen some of our recent USA-based adventures and that's got you thinking about a hunt of your own, then listen up. Whether it be an eagerness towards planning annual trips, or you're more time poor and want to plan towards a bigger, once-in-a-lifetime adventure, you're in the right place. Huntingful and the consultancy team will cater to your needs regardless of your desired hunt. James and I have been utilising their services for a couple of years now, and virtually all of our USA adventures are shaped by the guidance of our friends, the Huntingful advisors. Not sure where to start when planning a USA hunt? No problem. Not sure how to apply for tags? No dramas. Simply set a budget and have a general idea of what species you want to hunt, and the team at Huntingful will start narrowing the hunt to your preferences. If you're interested in using Huntingful's license application services to draw more tags across the Western United States, then email applications@huntingful.com and start the conversation today. Mention Twin Elements to get 25% off your first year of service. The Huntingful team will take it from there. Well, that is all for today, legends. We hope you enjoyed that version of Hog Deer Hunting Part 2. We didn't realise we were going to be talking for this long, but there was a lot to talk about after 10 days of hunting these tiny little minuscule creatures, and as you've heard, they are definitely a unique species that we've learnt a lot about, and it's cool to just say that we've experienced hog deer hunting. But that wraps up today's show. We are going to tackle one listener FAQ. If you have any questions following this podcast and want it featured on the show, please send those through to either James Doumtsis Outdoors, Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors, or the Twin Elements Instagram accounts, and we'll get back to you there. Or simply send us an email with the subject line FAQ to info@twinelements.com.au, and we'll get your questions featured on the podcast. So today's question has been sent in by Brendan Fakara. He's actually said a great question, and it's more of a statement which follows a bit of a question afterwards, just through his observations. So, hi guys, I shot a fallow doe yesterday morning, April 5th, that turned out to be pregnant. The unborn fawn was fairly small in comparison to fawns inside pregnant does that I've seen shot before in September/October. But strangely, this fawn or fetus had a full coat of fur, which the regular cycle of unborn fawns did not. The block I was on had plenty of croaking bucks, all displaying rutting activity. Any insight into what may have happened / been the reason behind this? Thank you. So that's absolutely awesome. I really enjoy this question. I think Brendan going to the effort of obviously field dressing this animal, gutting it, removing the uterus and all that type of stuff, having a hands-on experience is like pretty cool. You know, he's obviously having an in-depth look into this animal that he's harvested. And for me, I'll tackle I guess what he has identified as an abnormal cycle, because 90% I would say of fallow does currently in the month of April would actually be closer to weaning last year's fawn than giving birth to last year's fawn, if that makes sense. So 90% of fallow does, give or take, a certain percentage, correlation to that rule, rut and get bred by bucks during the month of April. If it's a prolonged rut because of nutritional effects on the does, their body condition, all of these things we've discussed on previous iterations of the podcast and episodes of the podcast, then potentially we can get delayed breeding of these does, but it's normally not more delayed than like a month or so, unless, in my opinion, this could be a young fallow doe or a yearling or an older doe that is so far out of the normal cycle because of potentially some underlying injury, some underlying nutritional deficit, some underlying condition which has resulted in her basically not being fertile at the time of regular breeding during the month of, even if we say March, April, May, and she has fallen quite far back to having a really small fetus in her uterus at the time of April the following year. So if we wind back the clock and understand that for a fact, fallow deer have a gestation of 7 months, so that's 7 months from the time that doe is bred to giving birth to her normal sized full gestation fawn that has grown in utero. Normally that lands us in being bred in April, giving birth in around December, which coincides with the abundance of feed availability at the end of spring. Brendan in this instance has identified from having, hands-on experience butchering plenty of does, taking them for meat, that he has identified that most of the deer that he shoots in September are pregnant because naturally, in the wild, deer get bred, deer remain pregnant. It's not that complicated. They're very good at breeding and reproducing. He has identified that in September, October sort of time, fawns are normally, say X size. It might be 2 kilos. It might occupy a basketball size growth within the uterus. He's saying in this doe, which he shot in April, which shouldn't be pregnant, which should be going into the position of being bred, the fetus is tiny. So if you go off that, then I would assume that it has been bred either in January, Feb, March, or January, Feb, or March, really. Probably not even March, because for it to be at a stage where he recognizes that it's a certain size small fetus, normally there's like an embryonic stage which is so minuscule and small that fawn might be, the size of a golf ball and then a tennis ball and then actually form like a head and feet. And this is just me deriving that off the veterinary background and like cattle reproduction, for example. What I find even more perplexing is the fact that he says the fawn, despite being small, has like hair, which normally I would associate as a fawn in late stages of gestation getting ready to be born. But in this instance, it doesn't really make sense. So again, it'll be interesting to hear what James thinks of it here in a second, but I wonder if this doe was either super immature and is an out of season fawn herself that then grows up through a period of winter when there's less feed available, is of a stunted body condition score. By the time she's finally able to be bred, she might have been bred in January or December, following a bit of spring growth, a bit of feed coming in. She's hit this body condition. She's now X amount of months old or years old, going through her first pregnancy, and she's so out of the normal sort of, regiment that is the fallow deer breeding season, that she's been bred by a buck. Because if there's a doe there to be bred, whether it's April, July, August, a buck, whether it's a spiker or a buck, will breed her. There's not a doubt in my mind that she'll be bred. Anyway, she's been bred a few months before April, or she's been bred, 5 months ago before this April period where she's been shot. And I wonder if, as a result of her being so small and stunted, the fawn size is actually stunted herself, because we acknowledge that whilst they have very strict growth and things like that, there is variability in the size of a fawn being bred. So even if 2 fawns hit the ground at the same date in time, same 7 months of gestation, a fawn might be, this is just a random number, it might be 10 kilos or it might be 17.5 kilos. So that's obviously a great variation. It's nearly, 50% larger in one aspect than the other fawn. I wonder if this fawn is actually tiny but of the correct gestational age to be growing hair, because to me it would make less sense that it's like a tiny little fetus that's say 2 or 3 months old in the mum's uterus and has hair. That would probably be more weird to me than just being a stunted fawn that's probably 6 months of gestation in a doe that's been late bred and has gestational, difficulties because she's already a stunted sort of doe. But either way, that's just my assessment of it. I think this is a fantastic hands-on question that actually gets your brain thinking about the whole cycle, and it's super, super cool because a lot of does currently are weaning their fawns that were born in December the previous year, and it's now, March, April going into May, where they're going to try and get bred so that they fall into that cycle of having a fawn on December in alignment with good feed for later this year, 2026.
Can you just read the question again for me, please? Because this is going to be a disclaimer. So you've got 2 cattle veterinarians here sitting in the car discussing, with the best of our, veterinary knowledge, what we think, our theories are behind what's going on here. And we're obviously using someone's information what I'm trying to say is who sent in the message?
Brendan Fakara.
So Brendan, I'm assuming, maybe a very experienced, field dresser and all this type of stuff, but it's also what I'm trying to say is he may, the fact that he's just not a veterinarian or not doing this stuff every day, he's basing his case scenarios off a certain period of experience with field dressing does, which may be a smaller number. So the information that we're getting may not be 100% accurate, but it's we're trying to obviously answer that question to the best of our ability. And because this, so I'm going to say something that's slightly different to Ayden. So can you just read the question again for me? Because I just want to hear some things.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is read the question, and then I'll try and break that down quickly into what is objective and subjective. So he says, "Hi guys, I shot a fallow doe yesterday morning on April 5th that turned out to be pregnant. The unborn fawn was fairly small in comparison to fawns inside pregnant does that I've shot before in September/October. But strangely, this fawn had a full coat of fur, which the regular cycle unborn fawns did not. The block I was on had plenty of croaking bucks, all displaying rutting activity. Any insight into what may have happened / been the reason behind this?"
Like I said, I'm going to go into something different to Ayden here, because so another theory that I and this is where factors that I would love to know would be, does he think it's a yearling doe, as in this is its first fawn, or does he think it's a mature doe that's had fawns before? Secondly, was there any other abnormalities on the body that may indicate an injury or something like that, what Ayden said? What was the body condition score of this doe when he shot her? Was she in poorer condition that may have made her cycle irregularly or later in the season than what you'd typically expect? Because even if they're in pretty poor condition, they will cycle. They generally just do it late. The fact that she's maybe cycled in just say January, that's super late, you know what I mean? So it's well, why did she not cycle? But then another theory that I guess, and that's where it would have been great to have a photo of the fetus because there's plenty of cows that I've preg tested in my life where what we've actually found is aborted or mummified fetuses. So what could have happened, and this is a complete spin-off, and that's where it's super interesting, is what can happen in a cow, and hence I'm assuming what can happen in a deer is with a cow, she may be bred Like, so just say the season, like we normally join cows in a period. So we normally join cows for just say a nine week period. So just say that period, for the sake of easy understanding, is the rut, which is March and April, right? So just say this cow in the scenario got bred last April when she was meant to be bred. If she's got complicating factors, that fetus may actually develop and may actually then abort. And in certain circumstances, if it's like big enough, it may actually like it will abort for any number of reasons. So it could be nutritional in sense of the cow, it could be a disease, you know, it could be due to like hormonal insufficiencies where like the hormones required to maintain pregnancy are not high enough. Like, you know, people may be able to relate this, obviously not nutritionally because we're all generally well fed in humans, but like you can relate this to if you've tried to have your own kids, especially like the hormonal stuff. So there's any number of reasons why something may abort. If this hind, if this doe for some reason may have got sick or may have got nutritionally stressed, she may have been bred in the normal period in April. She may have had this fawn be growing inside of her, and what may have happened, like what Ayden said, like there's going to be a variability in what the weight of a fawn is when it hits the ground, whether it's a male, whether it's a female, whether it's a doe's first fawn, it will naturally be small. It's like heifers and cows. Like there's so much variability in the calf weight in cows of when it hits the ground, depending on if it's a male or a female, if it comes out of a heifer or a cow, how well it's been fed, you know, like what's the body condition score of the cow, even at the time of getting in calf. Like there's so many factors, and those factors transfer across to does. So it's like, okay, if she was a first year fallow doe, like a yearling that's been bred, that calf's naturally going to be smaller. If it goes into a hard season, that calf, or that fawn that's growing inside of her may be smaller. And what may have happened is that fawn may have actually been growing, and got to, you know, just say October or November where it starts developing its hair. And I don't know exactly when it starts developing its hair. And it may have actually died in that doe. And then that fawn, what actually happens is a lot of the water, and that's where it would have been great to get a photo, a lot of the water actually disappears around the fawn or the calf or whatever when it aborts, and it's sort of what we go as mummified. And it almost gets stuck because it becomes dry, and it can't, because it's of a certain size, it can't fit through the cervix anymore. And so when I come to preg testing time, I find this like, yeah, little aborted calf, or, you know, obviously I've never found it in a deer, but you find this aborted calf where you can tell it's aborted because it's like, even if there's fluid in there, there's a very small amount, and it looks irregular because the placenta's coming off. I'm using an ultrasound, mind you, so I can like see this. It's not by feel, but even by feel, you can feel that the uterine wall thickness often increases, and yeah, the amount of fluid in there decreases. And so I'm wondering if potentially this fawn, may have actually died, and hence, you know, she then couldn't deliver it. But then she's got a fawn sitting inside of her that come the next April, you know, she hasn't been able to deliver a fawn in December, but that fawn's still inside of her. Come next April, when she gets shot, you know, she's in the heart of the breeding period, and she would naturally shut down. Like she wouldn't like keep cycling and stuff. She would most likely just become anestrus, or stop cycling, as we say. But yeah, then she's obviously been shot and butchered. So that's like another theory, I guess, which obviously is super out there and super interesting. But equally, like 100% what Ayden said, she could have just been bred super early in like December or January for also a lot of the reasons like we've talked about. But it's just, yeah, like we're not going to get an answer here, but it's just one of these things that we can theorize and rattle our brains on.
It is absolutely amazing, and like this is all speculation with a little bit of, you know, veterinary background, you know, sprinkled on top. But like exactly what James has said, which has got me thinking now. Like when I was in the Northern Territory preg testing, was doing it all manual, so by hand, opposed to James doing it with ultrasound. And in a lot of the empty cows, and to put it into a percentage, without having statistics, but more just like a subjective memory sort of thing, I would say probably around 20% of the empty older cattle, so domestic cows over around probably that 7 years old mark, 7 to 10, before they're culled, one of the primary factors where they end up being culled is that for successive years in a row they haven't had a calf, and that's all available to us through data and you know, someone preg testing them 1 year, that cow gets, you know, she's had a calf for 7 years, she's now in her 8th year of life, for example, and the property owner has a little asterisk next to her name saying did not calf last year. For whatever reason, they didn't sell her as an empty cow or a dry cow, not, you know, producing a calf, which is normally like the major reason why these animals get culled. She slips through to next year, and I would say in about 20% of those repeat offenders, on either the right or left side of the uterus, I would palpate that there was a fetus in the cow that did not feel normal. And when you're preg testing thousands of normal healthy calves a day, and then you feel one of these calves that James has sort of described as either mummified or macerated, it is super, super obvious. It would be like getting punched in the face. Like, it is a normal healthy calf has a nice shiny sort of texture feel to it, where it's that amniotic fluid in the uterus supporting that calf. In these animals, as James said, it's sort of pushed off to the side. A lot of the time the body wall sort of resorbs it. The uterus is a bit adhered to. It feels clunky, a bit, you know, hard, firm, and you feel this bony structure. And in a mummified fetus, it will just be in there preserved. There's no bacterial involvement or viral involvement where that calf breaks down. It's just resorbed on the side wall of the body. The same can happen, but if bacteria is, you know, introduced to that otherwise sterile birthing sort of site within the uterus, you can get what's called macerated. And like, you would preg test these animals, and you would, as you enter the animal to preg test them, you would genuinely smell like rotting fetus in there, which obviously isn't a sterile environment for then getting those animals pregnant in future calving episodes and breeding periods and joining fit periods and things like that. And it was honestly, like, now that James has mentioned it, that could definitely be a factor if this animal has aborted through some form of hardship, had either a mummified fetus and whatnot. It can result in her being a little bit abnormal. But honestly, this is a great topic. As you can hear, James and I are pretty passionate about these sort of things, and it's like, we don't know all the answers, but as hunters, like, the more that we can speculate, know, learn on, compare, talk with one another, the more that we become educated and actually grow as hunters and sort of, learn what's truly going on in front of us and observe and be able to match what we see in the field to what we know as knowledge, even in other animals. So, Brendan, great question, mate. Thank you very much for sending that in. That wraps up today's show and our hog deer hunting. We hope you guys have liked the last 2 episodes. Once again, congratulations to James, and for myself, hopefully I'll be able to hunt this elusive little species in the future. For you guys, our listeners, thanks for sitting through that one. We have enjoyed bringing it to you guys. This hunt will be available on our YouTube channel in future months. If you guys are not subscribed, please go over to YouTube and do that now. Simply search Twin Elements. We have so much content dropping over the next few weeks. We are in the process of dropping our Cayuga Adventures hunts from Cape York, North Queensland, Australia, where we hunt wild boars, feral pigs, tusky, tunners, whatever you want to call them, for around 5 to 10 days. James, Dad and I go and do this hunt with Brad Smith and Matty Moore up at Cayuga Adventures, and we managed to shoot quite a few good boars, all on film, as you guys can come to expect from us. So that drops every Wednesday evening from 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the Twin Elements YouTube channel. If you are also interested in our podcast, as you seem to be by listening to this point, please like, comment, rate the podcast, share it with a friend. It helps us grow and spread on this platform, and we truly appreciate you guys tuning in each and every week. That's all for now. We're going to continue the drive, but thank you so much for just coming along on our adventures. We're going to head back up north to New South Wales and hopefully get one last crack in on the red deer before the rut up there dwindles. So thank you very much for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next week on the Twin Elements podcast. Cheers, legends.